Hey guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. Here we have a large Yamaha keyboard, musical keyboard. It's pretty filthy, disgustingly dirty. It turned up in the e-waste. Digital piano P-105. It's clearly been neglected, and I don't think it works. I think it's got mechanical issues. Some of the keys don't work properly. I noticed there was a crack in the casing around the back. So it's not resellable, and the first thing I say when we're getting e-waste and when we're trying to save things from landfill and when we're scrapping is, if at all it has any use and any value other than scrap, it should be used that way. Scrap value really represents the lowest amount of value, but at least it still is a way of keeping this stuff out of landfill. But what I thought I'd do with this one, because it's too far gone, it's not worth selling, it's got issues, I think it's a good chance to pull it apart and scrap it. We'll see what's inside, we'll see what value we get, and if you're curious to know what's inside, oh, it's had a decent thump underneath by the looks of that. If you're curious to know what's inside a keyboard and whether we can get any scrap value out of it, stay tuned. So getting into this keyboard is going to involve removing a lot of screws. The screws are right around the base. In fact, there's hundreds of them. So I don't imagine it's going to really be worth our time, but we want to see what's in it. So let's go for it. And there's a nice collection of self-tappers. All of those screws just to hold the back on. Well, perhaps it holds the front cover, and then perhaps the other row around the middle might have held circuit boards or something. Let's have a look inside. The cover's loose, I haven't looked yet, and we'll see what electronics are in there. I don't imagine there's going to be a lot. Probably just more mechanical things, because the keys are actually weighted. Oh, here we go. How disappointing is that? We have some speakers, a small power board with hardly anything on it, a little board there which isn't bad, but it's tiny. At least that'll go in the mid-grade boards, and a few more speakers. And the rest of this is just all the mechanism. Oh, there are boards under there, but it doesn't look like there's much on them. So there's more screws to undo. We'll pull it apart and see if we can get any sort of value. I'm not sure what these metal pieces, I think these are what give the keys the weight to make them feel like you're playing a real piano, but they might be just steel. We'll pull that apart a bit more. We'll take the speakers out. And we will take the bits off this so that we can hopefully recycle the main plastic piece, but really there's very little value. And here's the back cover section all cleaned up. It is, as you can see there, it's PS, which is polystyrene, which is a recyclable plastic. I still have to investigate avenues of having this recycled properly. So that's got that piece cleaned up. I have the boards over there, only the one that's really worth selling, more screws, a bit of general rubbish, a very small amount of insulated wire, and the 4 speakers, and just a tiny little bit of pressing steel, just some brackets and things. But we'll get the rest of this main mechanism apart now and see if there's any value in there. So this big mechanism just lifted out after removing a few screws, and we'll attack that in a minute. So we're left with the top cover. It looks like we have a piece of just felt probably to keep the dust out from on top of the keys, and all we have left in there is I guess that's the control button board, so there's not going to be any good value in that, but we'll take that out anyway. And it's just a cloth, sort of a grilling for speakers, I think, for the sound to come through. So we'll have another piece of I think it'd be polystyrene plastic again, and then we just need to attack the mechanism. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with all the bits off there, but we'll pull it apart and see what we end up with. Top section now is clean. We've got all the contaminants off that, and it is polystyrene, so we'll put that over with the other bit. And now we've got the actual keyboard part, and you can see when you push the keys, it lifts that steel section up at the back. Now that linkage isn't actually a linkage, it doesn't do anything other than providing some weight. The actual music comes from electronic connections. So we're going to have a bit of steel in there, but look at all these screws across the top here I've got to take out. I'll tell you, this company Yamaha must have had shares in a self-tapping screw factory, because they've used hundreds of them. The containers building up there. Anyway, we'll take this apart and look at what we've got left. So let's have a look. I've got all those screws out. Let's have a look how these keys work. I think this end one's loose. And the steel rod had already fallen off that one. And this next section comes out, I think, as a sort of a gang of 10 or a dozen keys. And you can see they're really just, all they are is plastic. I think it's ABS plastic I saw on the top there. So that is recyclable again, but we'll have to find an avenue to get rid of that. These are the weighted part, so that's just a mechanical, you can see it lifting there, just a mechanical pivot. And all these underneath, there's rubber things. These will be just switch contacts. If we peel that rubber off, there you go, you can see the switch contacts there. So no scrap value at all, and these boards don't look like they're going to be anything much either. So this thing really isn't worthwhile for scrap, but we'll keep pulling it right apart. We've got to finish the job. So more screws removed, and if we look at this little switch pad, there's virtually nothing on the back. It looks like we've just got a whole row of little diodes, a bit of a wiring loom, just some ribbon cable, no value at all on that board. So this job's just getting less and less interesting. I certainly wouldn't do another one. Alright, we'll take the rest of these boards out and rescue the wire. At least we'll get some value out of that. And then we just got to perhaps pull those steel bits out. Now I've put these keyboard sections aside because even though there's no value and they're possibly recyclable plastic, they kind of hang together nicely. They're in gangs of, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 white keys with 5 black keys. They would mount nicely, as in they're flat at the top. We may be able to make some sort of decorative item out of them, repurpose them somehow. They're kind of cool, you know, they're going to look nice hanging up, or we might be able to create some effect with them. The rest of this is really a waste of time. The bulk of the whole organ, or keyboard, is just to allow it to feel like a piano. This is the bulk of the machine, and purely, it's the bulk of the weight too, and purely it's just counterbalancing weights to make the thing feel like you're playing a piano, because they give the keys the weights. The rest of it is really just your housings, your speakers, and the entire electronics that does all your different tones is this little board about the size of my hand, because the rest of them are just set up for all the switching. Obviously when you push a key you send a different signal to the logic board, and there's a little bit of a power board there, and that's it. So all the technology in this thing is there, and that's really low value for scrap. So yeah, anyway, we'll try and separate this a little bit so that I can recycle it. This main section is ABS plastic again, which is the same type of plastic that they make car bumper bars and all that sort of stuff out of, and it's certainly recyclable. So we've got to pull these metal bits out. Hopefully they're not too complicated, and that pretty well finishes up the scrap out job. So we'll get a rough idea of value at the end, and I'll have a bit more of a think about what I can do with these keys. So I do like my notepad, and I usually say let's see what value we get out of this, or we've got out of this scrap out, and in this case it's how poorly did we do. I often start with a dirty steel price, but this is 90% plastic, so you would never get away of putting it in dirty shred steel. So there's no value there as it was. And to scrap it out, what did we get? Well, I got the rest of these rods, weight rods out, and I tried to get the plastic things off the end, but they're pressed on quite firmly, and it's just definitely not worth it. If they had have pulled off just with a flick of my finger, then I could have at least sold the steel as clean steel. As it is, it would go as dirty. I've got it on the scales there, and for most of you guys, you would probably throw the speakers in with that as well. I can actually sell them, but we'll put them up and weigh them in with it. And there were a couple other little bits of clean steel, but it's certainly not worth even putting aside. So for the sake of the price, we'll add them onto the scales as well. So that's all the steel. And we've got about 3.5 kilos. So let's say dirty steel is dirty shred, we'll call it, 3.5 kilos at say around about 10 cents a kilo. We've got 35 cents, so very little value there. The other steel that maybe you would throw in, and it won't really affect the figure, is all the screws. Most of you know that I can sell these. I put them in jars and sell assortments in the shop, just for farmers and hobbyists and that sort of thing. And we got most of them in, and I usually get $5 per jar, so you know we're a long way short of the jar. So let's say 50 cents for the screws, and that's, as I said, that's something that I can add onto my value sheet because I have a shop. And while we're at it, the speakers, they're nothing flash, 6 ohms, 6 watt, they're in good order, but I might just allow, I know I'd probably put a couple of dollars each on those in the shop or something like that. So I don't ask a lot for them, and people buy them for little projects and that sort of stuff. So let's say $5. So I do get some value out of reselling parts. At least we're talking dollars and not cents. The wire was, I'm not even going to weigh it. There's a bit of just very light ribbon with foam covering and plugs still on it, so that would be low grade or attachment wire. A few pieces that would go in the better grade insulated wire, but it's not going to even register on the scale, so we won't count that. We have a little box here of the little power board or connector block board and the switching boards, and they will just go to the e-waste at the tip. I can take them out to the e-waste drop-off point, so no value there. I don't think they would even really be accepted as a low-grade power board, so I don't think there's any value at all in that. We have a tub of just rubbishy bits and pieces, so that will have to go in the bin, unfortunately. We have these keys, which I'll address in a minute, and the only other thing we have that pays anything is the main board. And look, I did try to weigh it on these scales. It barely registers. I would say it's probably about 50 grams. I think I could estimate about that. And I'm not going to go and get my smaller scales to weigh it up. 50 grams. I think mid-grade boards pay you around about $1.50 a kilo, something like that. So that's what? That's 15 cents for 100 grams, so about 7.5 cents. I'm not even going to write that down. So the best value I'm getting is the speakers. For you guys that are just scrapping, you've really just got some dirty shred steel and a little board that's barely noticeable. So scrapping out a keyboard, if you see one out on the street, if you're doing a bit of e-waste collecting, don't even think about it. The labour just to undo all those screws alone was a pain. It nearly flattened my drill, so I doubt you'd make enough to even cover your recharge power bill for your cordless drill. So no value for scrappers. It was fun to pull apart the first time. I certainly wouldn't do it again. I'm going to throw all that stuff in my dirty steel that I just take out to the transfer station here. I don't sell my dirty steel. It's not worth doing a drive to Melbourne for it. So the only value I've got is a little mid-grade board and some speakers and a few screws. And just before we finish up, I'll have a bit of a play with these keys and see if I can come up with anything. There we go. How does that look? I just threw a bit of sheet music in an old frame. It's not even a very old frame, it's just a modern one. And I screwed the piano keys, or the keyboard keys underneath. Anyone that has a bit of a flair for music might like something quirky hanging on the wall. Are you lonesome tonight? I think this, even though that was an Elvis song, I think this one was before Elvis. And there you go. Quirky use of the keyboard keys. I think that looks alright. I'm going to put 20 bucks on it in the shop. It only took probably 20 minutes to do. I didn't go to too much care, and I think it's come up okay. I've still got some keys left, so if it sells well I might make up a few others. And this is all I did. I just threw the sheet music, just cut it to size, sticky taped it to the cardboard backing underneath that masonite piece, and all I did was just drill a couple of holes and screw these. I've only put screws in the middle at the ends. If I wanted to put a screw in each one, it would level all the keys up nicely. At the moment they're a little bit uneven, but it was just a quick knock together just to see if I could do something with it. You guys get the idea, and if you have any other ideas for what I can do with the rest of these, drop some comments underneath. But I think at least this makes them saleable. And for all you guys that are into recycling all sorts of things, I did reuse the screws that I pulled out of the keyboard, and the wire, you see it's got a spring on the end there. The wire is actually plastic coated cable from a recent photocopier scrap out, and it actually makes really good picture hanging wire because it's very strong. There you go. Thanks for watching at Scrap Out. The conclusion, of course, is don't bother with keyboards unless you want to muck around and upcycle bits and pieces like this. So I hope you enjoyed that video. We'll do some more Scrap Out shortly, along with everything else I've been working on. Hope you're enjoying my channel. Would love some feedback. Give us some thumbs up. Share my videos around maybe. The more subscribers I get, the more likely I'm going to go flat out producing videos for you guys to watch. Okay, catch you next time. Bye.